short shorts because Joe Ratterman's going to come up and speak. Okay? And so let's give Joe a warm welcome as he makes his way up here.
Oh, there's my voice. So loud. That's awesome. Well, hello, friends. How are we tonight? How many people are part of SK this week? Like everyone in the room. It was so much fun. It was my first experience with SK, and just the energy and the excitement in that space was awesome. I want to be a much bigger part of it next year. I think I was enough of a part of it that I got sick, actually. Anybody else get sick after SK? Those kids are germy. So today I'm just like kind of a little bit exhausted, but so nice to see all of you. So many new faces, so we're just so excited that you guys are here. For those of you here for the first time, we are going through a series this summer. We're going through a series called The Journey. And it's the journey because we're following the story of the Israelites, God's people, God's chosen people, as he takes them out of captivity, out of the land of slavery, into a land of freedom, into a relationship with God. And we're following this story not just because we love Moses or we think the Middle East is really cool, but really because their story is our story. And their being rescued from captivity is really our story, being rescued from captivity and being given a relationship with Christ, freedom in that relationship. And so last week, Trey picked up, he shared about the 10 plagues and how God showed in every single one of those how he was bigger and better than the gods of Israel. And so the blood in the Nile was showing that he's bigger than the god of the Nile, and the death of the firstborn showing that he's bigger than Pharaoh and bigger than the sun god. He was freeing his people by showing that he was bigger and better. And then in the most big display of that love that he had for his people and his power, he separated the Red Sea. And in the moment that the last person stepped over to the other side, the waves came crashing down and swallowed up Pharaoh's armies. And so here the Israelites are standing on the edge of the Red Sea, looking back at everything they've ever known and looking forward at what God's got for them. You know, as I was reading this story, it reminded me of my wife Shelby and I's story when we moved to Colorado. You know, growing up, I didn't want to be a pastor. It never even crossed my mind. I was into art. I was going to go into advertising or something like that. But I had an experience. I had God show up in such a way that it completely marked my life. It messed up all my plans and sent me in a different trajectory. You know, I showed up early for church one day and I was praying to God. And I felt a tap on the back of my shoulder. And one of the sound and lighting guys, he asked me, he said, "Hey, Joe, do you think you could go stand in front of the audience or in front of the stage so I can test the lighting and stuff?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." So I'm walking down the aisle and I step up onto the stage and the light kind of hits you, it warms you up a sec. And then I'm just kind of panning left to right over all the seats. And then it hit me. It was a soft, still voice that said, "You belong. You belong here." And then I was flooded with goosebumps, head to toe. It was like I got struck by lightning. It was the craziest experience I've ever had. And so I asked, I was like, "Are you sure? Like, are you sure?" And once again, head to toe, just covered with goosebumps. This repeated 3 times. And I was freaking out. Because how many times have you had that kind of experience going to church? Probably pretty rare. Like, this was an extraordinary Sunday. And so I'm freaking out. I'm going to sit down. I don't know what to make out with this. And my pastor comes in and he says, "Hey, Joe, you looked really good up there. I need to have you give a sermon sometime." And for those of you that know me, I am terrified of public speaking. So inside I'm like, no, please, anything but that. But outside I was like, sure, I'll try this thing. And so I'm trying to process this. I'm walking outside and somebody from the children's ministry comes up to me and they're like, "Hey, have you ever considered going to seminary?" And internally I'm like, no, absolutely not. But outside I said, yeah, maybe I'll consider it. Fast forward 2 years. I think I got a picture of this. Shelby and I have all of our stuff packed up into a U-Haul. We are driving into the sunset, literally, headed to Colorado, looking back at everything that we've ever known, everything we owned in our car, and looking forward to what God has for us next, having no clue what he had next. So we, like the Israelites, were standing there, asking, now what? You know, God, what do you have for us? And for so many of us here, that's our question. You know, maybe you've grown up in church your whole life, but if you're really honest, your life doesn't look a lot different than your friends that may not know Christ. And you're asking the question, now what? Like, what's next? I think I've figured this Christianity thing out. Or maybe you just got back from camp and you're on an emotional high. Like, you're ready to go. Like, Jesus, whatever it takes, I'm in. But then you get back and your family's not into it as much as you are. Or your friends just don't get it. So you're asking that question, now what? And so for all of us here, we ask that question, what is next in the Christian walk? You know? And so let's pick up. It's in Exodus 13, 17 through 18, that we see the Israelite story. They're standing on the edge of the Red Sea. And it says, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. But God led the people around the way of the wilderness towards the Red Sea. And the people of Israel went out of Egypt equipped for battle. So here they are. They're standing on the edge of the Red Sea. Plague after plague. We've got gnats. We've got blood. We've got stuff raining down from heaven. The most powerful person in the world has been defeated. His army has been swallowed up by the sea. The text says that the Israelites are ready for battle. They've got swords, they've got shields, or whatever you had back then, and they are ready to go. But the text tells us that God does not take us the way of the Philistines, the way that was near. Instead, it says that God took them the way of the wilderness, down by the Red Sea. And for most of us here, we can't imagine this. We don't have a map of, the Middle East in our brains. So I pulled up this map. This shows the Exodus route. And if you notice, the orange arrows up here show the most direct route to the Promised Land. Scholars say it would take somewhere between 5 days and 3 weeks for the people to travel there, depending upon how many there were. But if you notice, God takes them the way of the wilderness. He takes them south, following these purple arrows. And a trip that was supposed to take, at max, 3 weeks, ends up taking 40 years. 40 years! We can't even comprehend that. 40 years. That is a long time. Has anybody here ever driven across Kansas before? Yeah, me too. It's the worst thing in the world. You're 40 minutes into the drive and you're like, get me out of here. And this isn't your family vacation. There's no gummy bears. You're not watching SpongeBob in the back of the seats. This is wilderness scorching heat. It's terrible. And God takes them the long way. Because God's way is the long way. And so what I love about this is God knew in this time that his people weren't ready for the Promised Land. Although they had left Egypt, they were carrying a lot of Egypt with them. And so when I think about our own walk, the thing that comes to mind is, God takes us through the wilderness. We're ready to go. We're like, God, let's, start performing exorcism and saving thousands of people. And he takes us the long way. He takes us through the wilderness. Where it's dry, where things are hard, where there's trials and temptations, where we have to cry out to God. God takes us the long way. Because the reality is that the long way is God's way. There's no shortcuts to Christian discipleship. There's no quick fixes. The long way is God's way. Now we know this. This is our experience. We've had this. Anybody, when you became a Christian, were you immediately perfect? You're like Saint Topher or Saint Clair automatically. You just put a saint in front of your name. And you had it all figured out. There you go. No, it was hard. And you took stuff into your Christian walk. You took baggage into your Christian walk, right? This was my experience when I became a Christian. Everything wasn't immediately perfect. No, I was still really attracted to girls and taking it too far physically in relationships. And I still wanted to party. And I still cursed. These things, in one sense, everything in my life had changed. Once I was lost, and now I was in this relationship, I had peace with God. But in another sense, I still carried a lot of those things with me. And I think for the Israelites, that's exactly what's going on. They spent 400 years in captivity. And while they may not be in Egypt anymore, they're certainly not free. See, what they don't get, and what we often don't get, is we take that slavery, we take those chains with us. So let's pick up in the text. It says in Deuteronomy 8:2, Moses is looking back. He's now on the other side. 40 years, he's taken these people through the wilderness, and he's looking back, and he's reflecting on what God had taught them through it. And he says, and you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, testing you to know what was in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not. You see, Moses had learned that God took them through the wilderness to test them. And this word in the Hebrew, it means to prove one's intentions. He took them there to see what was in their heart. And many of you out there might notice, hey, isn't God all-knowing? Doesn't he know what's in the hearts of man? Absolutely he does. You see, God took them into wilderness so they would see what was in their hearts, to prove what was in their hearts. And we know this as well. I mean, it's not when things are going pretty that you get to see what's really in your heart. It's when things are hard, when you have to cry out, when you don't have time to put yourself together. That's when the true heart comes out of it. So God takes his people through the wilderness. Though they're ready, though they're geared up for battle, he takes them through the wilderness. Has anybody here ever taken a vacation? Has anybody not taken a vacation? Better question. Everybody's taken vacation, pretty much. Shout out some places you've gone on vacation before. I didn't hear. British Columbia. Iowa is not a vacation. No one likes Iowa. So sorry. Trey. Yeah, have you guys noticed that when you go on vacation outside of the country, you don't cease being an American? You don't immediately pick up the language and start watching telenovelas and eating taquitos. Like, you're still pretty much an American. And it's almost like being taken out of your country into a new country, you become even more American. Because you recognize how American you are. That's kind of the story of the Israelites. Although they've been taken out of Egypt, they're still taking a lot of Egypt down there with them. It kind of reminds me, Shelby and I went on our honeymoon. We went to Cancun. And it was so much fun. It was all-you-can-eat resort. I was trying to find there it is. I was trying to find a photo to put up there, and seriously, the entire album is Joe eating this meal, Joe eating this meal, Joe eating this meal. I had 7 meals a day. It was so much fun. But what I love about this is food is amazing outside of the country. You're so excited about it. Tell them about day 4. And then the resort food gets kind of old. And you're like, I am so done with this. Get me a freaking cheeseburger. I am ready to get out of this place. And that was the story of Shelby. Shelby, are you here? Woo, there she is. There's my wife. She's so pretty, isn't she? Aww. Yeah, so she is done. She is ready for an American pizza. And so we packed up our bags. We're headed to the airport, and we're walking in the terminal. The cool wind just kind of hits you. It's cold, air conditioned. And we're walking towards our terminal, and it just hits us like a wave, just almost knocks us back. It's the most familiar, tasty smell you can possibly imagine. Just floods our nostrils. And I look over, and her eyes are just fixated 10 o'clock. She is glaring. She's got her eyes on something. And so I start turning my head to see what she's looking at, and the glow hits the back of every single seat. And I see it glowing there in the distance. Domino's Pizza. Domino's Pizza in Mexico. America and Mexico. It was amazing. And I look back, and she is staring up at me with just these puppy dog eyes, being I want pizza. I need pizza. And for anyone else, this would have ended great. We would have been stuffing our face with pizza, and we'd be covered in grease, and it'd be amazing. But Shelby has celiac. Do we have any celiac friends out here? Friends with celiac? Celiac's the worst thing on the planet. It's like a gluten allergy. So when you eat gluten, your body physically attacks itself. So although Shelby loves pizza, pizza is so bad for Shelby. And so I had to look at her in the most loving way that I possibly could and be like, Shelby, I love you, but you just can't have pizza. And she was devastated. I've never seen her so upset in my life. So upset. I am the worst. And so here we are, we got our bags packed, heading back from our honeymoon, entering into marriage, and we don't talk to each other for the next 3 hours. Just dead silence. You see, because you could take Shelby out of America, but you could not take Shelby's love of American pizza out of Shelby. That's the story of the Israelites. God took them out of Egypt, but Egypt was still very much in them. And Egypt, if we were really honest, was hurting them deeply. And he knew it could take just a moment to free his people from physical slavery, but it was going to take 40 years to free their hearts from captivity. For us, we can't really wrap our heads around this idea of, being in slavery for 400 years. God's people crying out, thinking God was so distant for 400 years. All of their identity wrapped up in what they could produce, getting satisfaction from, being enslaved. It was terrible. We can't imagine it. So I'd like us to do a little bit of an exercise. This might be weird for some of you, but we do weird things here, and it's awesome. So if you guys would take out that chain link that I gave you guys as you guys walked in, I want you guys to close your eyes. Close your eyes. There it is. I was serious. All right, I want you guys to take a deep breath. There it is. I want you guys to imagine for just a moment that you're in a dark, dingy cell. It is cold. You can feel the hard rocks against your back. As you breathe in for a second time, it smells of metal. It smells of rust. And you hear the repeated drip, drip, drip from a window, coming from a world that you've never seen. Your eyes have fully adjusted to the darkness. You've lost hope. What got you here? What are those chains that are holding you down? As you attempt to lift your hands, the weight of shackles which have worn into your wrists holds you back. What are those chains? Is it an addiction? Is it something that you said you'd never do, but you tried it just once? And then it was every month, and then it was every other month, and then it was every week, and then it became a daily thing, and you just can't get away from it. It provides comfort. It's familiar. Is it relationships? Is it the constant hopping from relationship to relationship, seeking to be loved, not believing in yourself that you're worthy of it, but seeking other people to say that you are valued, you are loved, and so you hop from relationship to relationship for someone to tell you that they love you? Is it something that happened to you? Something that someone you trusted, a family member, a friend, something terrible that they did to you? Is it something that's been holding you back? Is it something someone said to you once? You're stupid. Nobody likes you. You're annoying. Is it something that has latched itself onto your identity? It has become who you are and you can't escape it? Is it your phone? Is it something that you constantly run to, assuming that the life that you're living right now isn't exciting enough and maybe there's something better on the other side of that screen? So you're constantly searching. Is it grades? Is it constantly trying hard to earn good grades and studying into late hours so your parents would finally say, "You're worth it. I love you"? Friends, what are those chains? As you're sitting here, for you don't know how long, all of a sudden someone busts open the door. Light floods the room. Your eyes take a moment to adjust. Clean, crisp air fills your lungs. And this man, he walks towards you. He picks you up gently. He begins to remove your shackles. He begins to tug at you, to take you to a world that you've never seen before. But as you start to take steps, suddenly you realize that something is holding you back. You are caught between the tug of your Savior and the tight grasp on those chains. Those things that you've been holding on to all these years. Those familiar chains. Friends, you can open your eyes. What are those chains? What are those things that are holding you back from fully following God? What are those things that you cannot take into the promised land? There's no place for them there. God is calling you into a land of freedom, into a relationship with Him. And these things that are holding you back, there's no place for them there. What are those chains? How does God break these chains? If we're to be really honest, there's been times when we've cried out. We've tried. We've tried to let these things go that have been defining us. And if we were to be really honest, we don't know if God can relieve these chains. We don't know if He can do it. And if we were really, really honest, we're not sure we want God to get rid of it. We kind of like it. It's comfortable. How does God break those chains? He gives us bread. He gives us bread. God breaks chains with bread. You may be saying, that's absolute gibberish. That makes no sense. I have no idea what you're talking about. You are a crazy human. God breaks chains with bread. You see, as we pick up in the story of the Israelites, in Deuteronomy 8:3, Moses once again looking back, he says, "And He humbled you, and He let you hunger, and He fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that He might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of God." You see, we read in Exodus 16 that God gave the Israelites manna. And that manna, that's just another word for bread. It was something that came down from heaven every night. So the Israelites would go to bed and they'd wake up in the morning and the ground would be covered with like a thin, frosty substance. And when they gathered that up and ground it and pressed it, it became bread. It became a tasty, like kind of honey, oil tasting bread. You can kind of think of like honeycombs. Anybody like honeycombs? Love honey. Can you imagine if it just rained honeycombs every night? That would be amazing. Just get out your spoon like you're ready to go. That'd be awesome. So yeah, his only regulations on this manna that he was raining down from heaven for them every day was that you could only gather enough for today. And if you tried to gather enough for tomorrow or for the next week, it would rot and mold. See, what God is doing here is he's teaching them to rely on him. The text says he lets them get hungry, and then he feeds them. Every day, day after day. Just enough for the day. God was breaking their reliance on other things by letting them rely on him instead. And you may be saying, Joe, that makes absolutely no sense. I don't see God raining down honeycomb from heaven for me. In fact, at times God feels really far away. I'm not even sure he's listening. How does God break chains with bread? Well, this is where we get to fast forward to my favorite part of the Bible, Jesus. Anybody else's favorite part? Yes, Jesus. Love Jesus. Big fan. So in John chapter 6, Jesus is out in the wilderness. He has a crowd of 5,000 people. And he has just fed those 5,000 people with a few loaves. Strikingly similar to the story of the Israelites. And in verse 35, he says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger. Whoever believes in me shall not thirst. Jesus is making a radical claim. And he makes it even more explicit in a few verses later where he says, I am the manna that comes down from heaven. I am the bread of life. See, Jesus is saying that you need me every day. That whereas your fathers ate manna in the heaven in the wilderness, they eventually died. If you eat of me, if you take me every single day, if you wake up and say, Jesus, I need you today, I will be enough. I'll be enough today, and I'm going to be enough tomorrow. You say, Joe, that still makes absolutely no sense. How does God break chains with bread? You see, God takes us through wilderness. He takes us through trials and tribulation. He takes us through really hard stuff where he seems distant and it's dry. So we cry out to him. So we hunger for him. And then he feeds us. He lets us go through times where we are anxious and terrified and we are scared. So he can be our strength. He lets us get sad and lonely and depressed so he can comfort us. He lets us get hungry, and then he feeds us every day, day after day. Some of you may be thinking that sounds awesome, but also really terrible. Did God make my parents get a divorce? Did God make that terrible thing happen to me? Did God make me struggle with that? Absolutely not. No. We live in a fallen, broken world. The world is not covered in bubble wrap. Things are hard. And he gave us freedom, and sometimes people use those freedoms to do really terrible things. But he does let us go through those situations. And he promises us that he is enough. Just enough for today. And then tomorrow will be just enough for that day. You know, I had a preaching teacher that said that you can't preach a sermon until the text preaches at you first. And this has definitely been my story with this text. For the guys in my small group, do we have them? Guys in my small group? You got to shout or something. Make me proud. Oh, there they are. They're the most exciting bunch. You guys are so lucky to know them now. So I was sharing with them, just this last year, I have been struggling with anxiety. Like really bad. Like terrified, want to run away at times, like just weighs me down, this constant weight of like stress and anxiety. And bouts of depression where I've just felt really empty at times. But I'm very much like a pick yourself up by your bootstraps, like let's solve this problem, what can I do to fix this? And so I have attempted time and time again to figure it out. And so it's like maybe if I read books on anxiety, I can figure it out. Or if I exercise enough, or I give up coffee, or I get enough sleep, I take showers. It's probably good to take showers. But whatever it is, like could I fix this thing? And meanwhile, God's been standing in the background watching myself fill myself up with things that won't sustain. Of the things that are satisfying. Meanwhile, he's been standing there crying out, Joe, I am enough. Whoever comes to me will not hunger, and whoever believes in me will not thirst. I am enough. I am enough today. I am enough tomorrow. I am enough. I am the bread of life. So what does it look like? What does it look like to see God break these chains with bread? What does it look like to follow Jesus, to choose Jesus over our chains? You know, it could be as simple as you wake up in the morning, instead of reaching for that cell phone, you say a quick prayer and say, God, you're enough. Today you are enough. I need you today. Or maybe it's waking up 15 minutes early and you just decide to spend 15 minutes with him in his word, allowing that word to transform you, to shape you, to allow him to speak to you. Or maybe it's as you're eating meals, you decide, like, before you pray, you say, God, you sustain me far more than this Eggo can sustain me. You sustain me more than this bag of Doritos. It doesn't have to be a lot. And next week, we're going to take a look at all different ways that we can spend time, we can build this relationship with Christ. What does it look like to say, Jesus, you are enough every single day? Well, friends, you are still holding on to that chain. You've been holding on to it this entire time. And there are still things in your life that are holding you back. So I'm going to invite the band to come on up. They're going to be playing the song Sustain Me, which I love. Because it talks about letting God sustain us, letting him be enough every single day. What I want you guys to do is hold that chain link, and I want you to squeeze it tight in your hand. And I want you to think about, what was that thing that we talked about? What was that thing that's holding you back from fully worshiping God? Hold that in your mind. And then as the song's playing, whenever you guys feel ready for it, we're going to have a table set up here with a little bucket on it. And I want you to take that chain link, and I want you to drop it into the bucket. Whenever you're ready, we're not going to go row by row. Just whenever you feel called to say, God, I am done with this. I am ready to choose you once and for all. I want you to drop it into the bucket. And then we're going to take communion. And I thought this was a pretty fitting example. God, in the form of Jesus, says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will not hunger. And so in this simple act, we are going to grab this chain, and we're going to set it into this bucket. We're going to say goodbye to our chains, and we're going to choose to take Jesus. And so on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took bread and he broke it. And he said, this is my body, which is broken for you. Every time you eat of it, do this in remembrance of me. So he took the bread and he ate it. So as you guys take the bread, I want you to think, today I am choosing Jesus. You are enough. You are enough. All right, bow your heads with me. Father, you are enough. We need you. And we have gathered here today to express that need for you. Father, there are things in our lives that are holding us back from truly worshiping you. There are things, if we're really honest, we're not sure we're ready to give up. You have called us to this place to hear this message because you are standing by us saying, I am enough. I am enough today. I will be enough tomorrow. I will sustain you. So, Father, I pray that you would fill each of these students here with your Holy Spirit and speak to them in a powerful way, helping them to identify what is that thing that's holding them back. May we choose once and for all to choose you every day, just enough for today. It's in your Son's holy and precious name we pray. Amen.
On this arid ground, scorn
And I just love this opportunity, the opportunity that we get to see Christ actually break our chains. And I really believe exactly what Joe was saying. It's in that moment that we a lot of times see God the most. It's in this moment when you have your chains that you see God the most a lot of times. So we're just going to sing this again. And I just want you guys just to pray this prayer. Lord, sustain me. Reveal yourself to me. Literally just ask that. God, will you please reveal everything that you are to me? I want to know you closer. I want to hear you. I want to see you. And then just say that again. Lord, reveal yourself to me. Pick me up. Dust me off. Give me faith. And Lord, just help me to believe. Because, Father, I desire to believe in you more right now. And so let's just all stand together and let's just sing this and declare to God. Father, reveal yourself to us. Let's just sing that one more time.
Sustain me, reveal yourself to me. Sustain me, reveal yourself to me. Pick me up, dust me off, give me faith, help me believe, bring life to these dry bones. Pick me up, dust me off, give me faith, help me believe, bring life to these dry bones. Oh, sustain me, reveal yourself to me. Oh, sustain me, reveal yourself to me. Pick me up, dust me off, give me faith, help me believe, breathe life into these dry bones. Pick me up, dust me off, give me faith, help me believe, breathe life into these dry bones. Pick me up, dust me off, give me faith, help me believe, breathe life into these dry bones. Pick me up, dust me off, give me faith, help me believe, breathe life into these dry bones. You're the light of the world. You're the
Father, we just declare right now out to you, Father, that you are the light of this world. Despite all the darkness that we're in, Father, you are the light. And it really can penetrate through all the darkness in our lives. And Father, we just want to thank you just for continuing to break the chains in our life. And Father, I know it's in your character. I know it's who you are, that a lot of times you want to redeem those things. And so, Father, we just cry out to you right now that you can just continue to redeem those things, Lord. And we understand this is a tough road. We're not out of the wilderness in a lot of ways, but Father, you desire to use us while we're in the wilderness. So, Father, just break our chains, pick us up, dust us off, Father. Reveal yourself to us right now, because we desire to experience you. We desire to know you. Lord, we really do love you, but again, more importantly, we just want to thank you for loving us despite who we are or the things we've done. Father, your love is that great, your love is that grand, your love is that big. Father, I just ask that when we leave this place, that you can just continue to move in our lives. Continue to break our chains. Lord, we thank you again just for tonight and this opportunity that we get, Lord, just to collectively worship you. We pray this in your holy and precious name. And we all say, amen. Awesome, guys. Thanks so much for coming. Hey, I have two quick announcements. One is your chains. You just put them back in here, right? I know it's kind of weird, but if you want a chain as a reminder, I know a lot of times, I actually had a chain like this. It's not this big, but you guys can take a seat. Actually, stay. I'm just kidding now. Kneel. Sit. Just kidding. Okay? But it was really cool because I wore this chain as a reminder of everything that God did in my life and all the things that God has done in my life. And I wore it on my watch. And I just had it on there for literally probably 10 years of my life. It was really crazy. And but it was just a constant reminder. So if you would like to have your chain back, in a sense of not whatever, but just as a reminder of everything that God is doing, then I think it'd be really cool just for you guys to come back and grab one. And so that's the first thing. Hey, the second thing is we want to encourage all of you. Right now, we're just going to break up into two different groups. And our goal, this is our hope. We're trying to really get a pulse on our community. And we want to encourage you guys. We have these surveys. We're going to break up into these groups, and we're just going to, it's not going to take that long at all. But, and what it's going to do, so Mount Massive is going to meet over there. So if you go to these schools, go over in this corner. If you go to Little Bear, and you go to these schools, go over here. And what these surveys are for, I want to encourage you guys to not look at your neighbor as you take this test and all those kinds of things. But what it really is it is trying to give us a true perspective of what our community is dealing with. We're trying to figure out, okay, how much do you guys like this program? That's one thing. Another thing we're even trying to figure out is how many of you guys come from divorced families? How many of you guys look at and struggle with pornography? How many of you guys do all these kinds of things? And this will really just help us get a good understanding of the things that you guys are dealing with. And so try to answer them honestly without looking at your neighbor, because it'd be really weird if I'm circling the pornography one and my neighbor's looking. I'm like, okay, stop looking, And so just try to be as transparent as you possibly can, because this will really help us. So can you guys do that? Cool. Thank you guys so much. And so if you guys, Little Bear over here, Mount Massive over here. We love you guys. Thanks for coming. Survey will only take just a few minutes. We have pens and paper. Go to your mid-sized team. Grab your chain if you want it back.
That's sweet.
All right, we're done with the camera.